This week's episode was brought to you by Chills, Hash, and Kino. Thank you, Chills, Hash, and Kino. It's with the generous support of listeners just like you that keeps our supply wagon of genetically enhanced protein and psychedelic-infused carrots well-stocked on the field of ontological battle with the archontic forces of the old Aeon, which have ruled this earth since the days of the dinosaur empire, which came here from the Osirian constellation to establish a cosmic burger nexus, which is both a form of government and an interdimensional drive-thru for spiritual carnivores across the galaxy. If you'd like to help us shut down the Archontic Burger dictatorship, or just hear the second half of this highly classified interview with Miguel Connor, then please visit www.patreon.com/thewholerabbit, where your monthly donation of just $5 will not only get you access to the second half of this episode, but every single one of our extended fried banana and peanut butter episodes, which stretch so far back in time you'll need to hire a robot to scroll through every single one. But that's not all. If you sign up right now, I'll send you a 5x5 high-quality vinyl sticker of our Big Bunny Baphomet cover art, which is guaranteed to be intercepted by the government to be scanned for its anomalous properties before finally arriving at your residence, where we guarantee you can stick it to a robot or even your biological children. It'll stick to pretty much anything. And if all that were not enough, you'll even get access to our highly secret Discord server where we pull tarot cards every day and discuss our plans to take over the world with a giant refurbished Atlantean mechanical head which can see into the future but is limited to speaking in riddles. In this week's episode, we're joined by the legendary author and Gnostic podcast pioneer Miguel Connor to discuss his latest book, The Occult Elvis, which presents accounts from Elvis's wife, friends, and family, along with the Memphis Mafia and his spiritual advisors, to reveal Elvis as the mystic, occultist, and shaman he truly was. By examining Elvis's efforts as a natural healer, his UFO encounters, and his telekinetic, psychic, and astral traveling abilities, Connor argues that Elvis was America's greatest magician, and he came on our show to talk to us about it. In the free side of the show, we discuss the occult material Elvis studied, the role the devil played in the blues, and how Elvis harnessed its power as an American messiah, armed with a host of magical powers and abilities fitting of this lofty title. Then, in the extended show, discuss Elvis's shadow side, his romance with archontic power, and even what he has to do with the visionary Gnostic author Philip K. Dick. Thank you, and enjoy the show. I think most people know Elvis was drafted into the military. Does anyone know what he was assigned to do in the army?
What?
To look for suspicious minds.
Cute. Almost a dad joke. Almost a dad joke.
Speaking of dad jokes, I don't understand how Elvis got so fat. He ate nothing but a hound dog.
Oh my God. Love it. Love it.
My wife left me screaming, "All you do is quote Elvis Presley lyrics to me." Frankly, I'm all shook up. Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Whole Rabbit, where we don't just explore the dark mysteries of Ziggy Stardust and what it has to do with the prophecies of the world-conquering Chakravartin. Nay, we go even further down the rabbit hole, deep into the catacombs of the American dream to experience the unfiltered, ecstatic gnosis of America's Gnostic, extraterrestrial messiah, Elvis Presley, led by the mighty creator, author, and host of the legendary Aeon Byte Gnostic Radio podcast, Mr. Miguel Connor, who was set to deliver this evangel to the world April 8th with his latest literary masterpiece, The Occult Elvis, an utterly compelling biography revealing Elvis as a mystic, occultist, and the shaman he truly was. Well, thank you for joining us today, Mr. Miguel Connor. It's a supreme honor to have you on the show as the little Gnostic podcast to the big one. We admire your work and extend to you a welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you very much. You know I had to say that, and that's glad to be here. Interesting you mentioned Ziggy Stardust, because I'm working on the sequel to the Elvis book, Elvis 2.0, where I talk about David Bowie, and he and Elvis are intertwined.
Ooh.
Like I couldn't believe it, but that's to come. They're the same character, same force of cosmic nature.
Awesome.
I had no idea, and I learned that by reading your book. Before we get into it, we're also joined by our co-host, the dog lady of A-Town, Marisama.
Woo!
The veteran bunny of Baphomet's Black Legion, Malachor 5.
Hello, hello.
He may be taking a short leave to go on tour. Maybe, maybe not. He has his own Elvis destiny he's also following. More as that unfolds. And also, the noble ninja of Nuit, Heka Astra.
Hello.
We're still trying to import her to America. We're working on that. Now, for those unfamiliar with Miguel Connor, he's not just the host of AN Byte Gnostic Radio. He's also a writer and voiceover artist. His books include Voices of Gnosticism, Stargazer, Heretic, and The Executioner's Daughter. He lives in Northern Illinois, and if any of his other books are as good as The Occult Elvis, you need to check them out right now, because I read The Occult Elvis cover to cover. Frankly, I'm happy this was my introduction to Elvis, because I knew absolutely nothing about Elvis. I didn't even know Unchained Melody was his song. I didn't know anything. So thank you for initiating me into Elvis. And your book, The Occult Elvis, releases to the public on April 8th, which just happens to be the 121st anniversary of Aleister Crowley beginning his channeling of the Book of the Law. I feel like that is some profound statement of some kind.
Very interesting. Yeah, no coincidences, as they say.
You didn't plan that?
Oh, I had no control over it. It's all the publisher.
No way.
Yeah. Everything was the publisher. The cover, I had a little input. The original cover I wasn't happy with, and I just made my case, and they're a very cool publisher, and they changed it. And as long as and the important thing is it's got the Ankh. So important that Elvis has that Egyptian Ankh, which he wore all the time. He's so tied into Egyptian mysticism, as you read in the book. They're almost inseparable. Memphis is no coincidence, right?
Yeah, you mentioned that in the book, that there's plenty of places in that area that have names of, like, let's say, Confederate generals. Not many of them have Egyptian names, but Memphis does.
Does, and I think the name means Al-Twani, the city that overlooks two places, something like that. And that's the theme of the book, too, the crossroads, the trickster, devil at the crossroads. And you find that just with Elvis all the time. He really was, as I call him, the Lord of the Crossroads, where everything changed and everything goes into a new direction and so forth. Post-war America, and even today, I think Elvis is important as we as a country go into a crossroads, into whatever the hell our next incarnation is.
He certainly seems like a transformative character for the American destiny itself. Before we get into that, and I want to get right into it because we love to talk about magic and especially Gnosticism on the show. But first, have you been an Elvis fan for a long time? And how did you get it in your mind to write a book about Elvis, let alone what he has to do with the occult?
That's a good question. I honestly still don't consider myself a fan. I feel like I was doing a friend a favor because this came to me almost out of nowhere. I was always a Beatles guy. One of the beginnings of the book is that famous scene in Pulp Fiction, which you can only find in the theatrical release. Tarantino somehow didn't like it, and then it messes up another scene where Mia Wallace tells Vincent Vega, "You are an Elvis person." But before that speech where she says, there are only two people in this world, Elvis people and Beatles people. You can like each other, but you can't be either, and that will say a lot about you. I always thought I was a Beatles person. Now I am an Elvis person. And, the end of the book is kind of that big reveal of what it means to be an Elvis person. I don't know if we want to give this spoiler alert away, but I always thought I was a Beatles person, and I didn't know anything about Elvis. Again, I never listened to his music, kind of knew about his history. I'd read like a book, one biography all my life, 2013, The Seeker King by Gary Tillery, and it's a more traditional biography, but it does touch upon some of the supernatural stuff he went through. But that was during a time when I was researching rock stars and, all the weird stuff they were, Beatles into Hinduism, Bowie into Kabbalah, Page into Selima, yada, yada. And I just sort of filed it away like, well, rock stars and actors are into weird stuff, Ron and Nancy Reagan were into astrology and Manly P. Hall. It's just what they do. We do that all the time. We just kind of file it away. But then in the year 2020, and it's centered around an ayahuasca ritual I did, 2 ayahuasca rituals I did, suddenly Elvis just came out of nowhere with a fury in the form of visions, synchronicities, tuggings in my gut, and I could not get Elvis out of my mind, and I really didn't know why. I listened to him for 2 months straight. I couldn't listen to anything in the car or whatever. And it overtook me. It obsessed me, and I couldn't shake it. And I didn't want it. Again, I thought I was a Beatles person. And eventually I just gave in. And then a cold night, February 2023, I sat down. I said, all right, I'm going to write this book. All this stuff is coming to me. And I sat down with only one biography of knowledge, knew nothing, and I started writing this. And 3 months later, it was out. And I did some edits. I went to Mitch Horowitz, who's a big Elvis fan, and connected to the publishing world. And he said, "This is it. This is the one." And a month later, I had a book deal signed. I don't want to say he was channeling me or something. I like to call it a quantum entanglement. I was quantum entangled with Elvis. We were in the same level beyond time and space, communicating with each other. As you read in the book, there's a lot of visions and almost fictional accounts. It's not linear. It's not even a category book. It's just something completely different. And here I am, an Elvis person now in 2025.
I feel like that's what makes great art, is when it possesses you to some extent.
Plato said, yeah, you have to be possessed by Dionysus, the muse, something has to, divine madness. Society thinks you're insane, but it's the greatest honor you can have. It's really why we're here.
I had my Chapel Perilous experience occur when I began studying Jack Parsons, so I can appreciate the sentiment. Now, I don't even think most people know that occult and esoteric wisdom was associated with Elvis, or that he was into it, or further still, that high strangeness was not only attracted to him, but he could conjure it on demand sometimes to heal others. In your book, you state, the world overlooked one magic user, the greatest one, describing Elvis as America's shaman. So this might come as a surprise to some people. What would you say makes Elvis a shaman, specifically an American shaman?
Well, yeah, that's sort of my tagline, clickbait, if you would, but I think it's a strong thesis that he is the greatest magician, more than Aleister Crowley, John Dee, even Jack Parsons. And of course, I go in the book that rock music was a spiritual system. Vegas is his temple. And right there, I could drop the mic, if that's true. And he is the greatest magician. And of course, his abilities, as I go in the book, manipulating the weather, controlling objects, healing, astral travel, the whole wizard Gandalf thing. He was ahead of everybody, I think. But it's a fun thing. We can, have fun on social media and, shots fired kind of thing. But a shaman is obviously, it's obviously shamanism, as they say, is the oldest religion in the world. It's not really a religion, it's a spiritual modality. Every culture and tribe has a shaman of some sort. I don't think there are exceptions. It's just the way the human tribe and collective psyche works. And the shaman is always a spiritual troubleshooter of his tribe. He's the guy that goes into the spirit world and brings back the magic, the art, the solutions to help the tribe spiritually, mentally, and physically. Shaman works as a counselor, as a psychologist, as a healer. He helps the tribe understand which way they need to go in comparison to the cosmos and the rest of the spirit world and all that. So, and he's always on the edges. The shaman is the guy at the edge of town. He's the outsider. He's often a figure that is broken. He's a figure that went through some sort of trauma and the channels of communication opened, and he sees the universe in an apocalypse, a lifting of the veil. As I talk about drawing on Paul Levy's work on Wetiko, he's the wounded healer. He's so broke. I mean, this is just MK Ultra, Stranger Things, Severance kind of stuff. It's no secret, no surprise. Yeah. Traumatize a kid, you create a wizard. And Elvis was really traumatized as a kid for various things, various issues. This opened these channels of communication, and he basically became the wounded healer, the person whose wounds allows him to help others, and he can heal others because of his wounds, and he doesn't want to heal himself because he feels that his brokenness is what gives him his powers, like 11 in Stranger Things or something like that. And that's pretty normal too. And then in circumpolar shamanistic traditions, the shaman, because of this power that they carry and this responsibility and this trauma, they end up being, guess what? A broken down drug addict. It's normal in traditions, and the tribe's like, that's your job, dude. And the shaman's like, I know, this is what I'm supposed to do, and I'll die early. That's what my role is. And Elvis fits that to the T. When America came out of World War II and the Great Depression, suddenly we had this massive empire history had never seen. We had satellites, mass media, nuclear bombs. There was UFOs. There was more money than God in Eisenhower's America. I mean, it was like something else. And I go with the different theories of why this happened, Nazis, UFOs, whatever you want to call it. And this country was sort of in a psychic shock. And what helped this country transition into this empire and give it a spiritual, independent, and hopeful dimension was these priests like Elvis, Little Richard, Johnny Cash. They brought this spirituality called rock music, and I go in the book that rock music is really fusion of gospel and blues, two very spiritual traditions. One's like devilish and hellish, African animism. The other was sort of experiential Christianity. And Elvis brought us through this crossroad as America's shaman. He liberated women. He taught men how to be more sensitive. He understood how to use technology. He made it cool to look at alternative music. He made it cool to look at alternative spirituality and question the status quo. I mean, he just did so much. So I hope I'm not rambling here. I mean, if you get me going, I'll just keep going.
No, I love it.
I like what you said about him having like this kind of shamanistic leadership, because I think with people like that, you get this kind of immense gravity. And the way that people are led is by being attracted like gravity to these people. And I think that was a big driving force.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, again, he was when Elvis came out, the word teenager didn't even exist. It wasn't in the vocabulary. It wasn't a concept. You were a kid. You got pubes. You did some education, and bam, you had to go to work and start a family. With Elvis, suddenly this group came and said, whoa, 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 what's going on with the world? We got Russians over here. We got we got UFOs, bombs of, we destroyed half of Japan. Well, let's take a break. And this sort of new demographic appeared, who also had money because their parents felt guilty because of the war and the Great Depression. A lot of money, you could afford a house with a 2-car garage and all that, even if you were a middle working class person, and they doted on their kids. And these kids came out and they said, we want more than traditional America. We want to look at some of the minorities. We want to look at some of the other religions in the world. We want to explore and try to understand where we are. And Elvis sort of was the Pied Piper shaman who led this new generation to this new post-war America, the greatest empire that history has ever seen. So he really was essential to the psyche and the collective consciousness and unconscious of not just America, but the West.
That's a huge transformation for an entire society, for an entire culture to acknowledge a transitional phase. As
I show, something was up, and we don't know what it is, because when you look at human evolution and technology and everything, you're putt-putting. The graph is normal. Suddenly you have the Sumerians, right? And suddenly, pop, a civilization just pops out of the ground, advance. Then humanity keeps going putt. And then suddenly after World War II in the late 40s and 50s, we see this huge explosion that we've never seen. The graph just shows it shooting up, and then it sort of goes to normal at the end of the 20th century. Sorry, but in the 21st century, we really haven't done much. AI, internet, all that stuff is still 20th century. And we go, what happened? And this is based a lot on Chris Knowles' series, Lucifer's Technology. So we don't know what happened, and it was never seen in history, and it changed everything. And somehow Elvis not only took advantage of this technology and this society, but again, he sort of helped the world. He was a buffer and a coping skill and a shaman to help the world with this brave new world we were in, for better or worse. I mean, I don't make judgment calls.
So he's kind of like surfing the wave of the new aeon and kind of showing us the way.
Bingo. Well said. Yes, that was it.
I'm a huge David Lynch fan, and I feel like David Lynch certainly acknowledges this shift after World War II. It's kind of all over his work and his focus on rock and roll. And I'd even argue that Nicolas Cage's character in Wild at Heart is heavily inspired by Elvis, at least in terms of the mannerisms he's doing in the movie and stuff. And David Lynch is literally telling us the same message. It's just that Lynch isn't making it a nice story all the time. It's a lot of trauma. But Elvis is like the savior of this whole traumatic experience that happens. And it's funny, interesting that you say that, you know, we kind of peaked and we've sloped back down to normal and we haven't reached a twin peak. You know, we haven't matched that vibe, you know, literally. I wanted to say that, you know.
Beautifully said, and bingo, because that is so true. I mean, I have a quote in the book. David Lynch doesn't mince words. He says, Elvis is the greatest icon of our century. There is nobody else. I mean, that's quite a remark. And it is true. This sort of dark light of post-war America is something Lynch struggles. And of course, Nicolas Cage certainly was just Elvis in Wild at Heart, but I always think Nicolas Cage's life, you know, Elvis is also his idol, is him trying to catch up to Elvis, him trying to be Elvis. His entire career is him trying to be Elvis. So yeah, David Lynch and Elvis are definitely, they're also quantum entangled.
I agree.
I think it's right in time, just to touch on the new Aeon stuff. I think it's right in time with the Aeon of Horus and what you were saying about teenagers not existing, because if we are in the Aeon of Horus and you look back to the representations of Horus, you have Horus the Younger, the son of Isis, and then you have Horus the Elder. And the entire transitional phase is, you know, the contendings of Set and Horus. And this is kind of like, if we're in the Aeon of Horus, he's like leading us through how to go about doing that. And the first step is to acknowledge that we are in that transitional phase.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I go into a lot of speculations in the book and I say, I don't agree with this, but this author agrees with, I put it all on the table, whether it's Jung or Steiner or Mark Stavish and egregores. Like Chris Knowles, yeah, he goes with the solar Elvis, you know, the Horus Apollo Elvis. I break away because to me, I feel that the trickster is always the great archetype or force when there is a transition. We see that in Native American lore. We see that in every myth in the world, and that really represents Elvis, that figure that will lead you through the doorways. Hermes is the god of doorways. The door hinge depends on Hermes, and all these other trickster figures. Then when a society, you know, settles down, we can go to the solar. So in my personal mythology, it's the trickster, and I would always side with Seth over Horus. But that's me, because again, I deal with Gnosticism, and Gnosticism is really all about the trickster. If you look at Gnostic myth, Jesus and Sophia are rewritten or presented as tricksters.
I totally get it, because I've said before, you can't have the Aeon of Horus without the Aeon of Set.
Right.
You know.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's a return topic on the show, along with the devil and Gnosticism. And I have some questions that pertain to those things, but we're right over the target here to discuss, what does Elvis, and more specifically rock and roll, have to do with the devil, especially with the birth of the blues and Robert Johnson? Because you make the point in your book that the devil in the blues is not so much the ontological evil that you would find in a theology text, right? It's more subtle. It's a folk trickster that has a sometimes ambiguous nature, but oftentimes takes its toll and has unexpected consequences. I personally love that idea, and we can see that part of what made Elvis so controversial was his association with black music and his association with black culture, and even, you mentioned in the book, a little bit of gender bending. Not so much transgender, you could say, but he could be androgynous at times, maybe a bit of an Adonis, if you will. And so I wanted to know,
quite sexual. Like, he added a sexual element into rock and roll that a lot of people were not ready to accept.
Sure. Yeah, I do talk about how the concept of the androgyne and how powerful it is. Obviously, Jung talked about the anima and the animus. The ancients always talked about the great hermaphrodite, whether it's the first chapter of Genesis or Plato's hermaphrodite. You see the Kabbalah, the Adam, it's all over. And I think Elvis really encapsulated and got these energies together. Again, Lord of the Crossroads. He used to say, I carry heaven and hell with me, and I have to be careful. What's the hell part? Yes, that is the blues. Because the blues really came from a lot of the African animism, and they simply rebranded their trickster beings into this devil. And yes, the most famous story is the father of modern blues, and that is Robert Johnson, some dude who is just a typical normie, and then he disappears for a few weeks and comes back with this guitar sound that nobody had ever heard. He was like, you know, Jimi Hendrix or Van Halen. People are like, whoa, what is this? And he changed history, and then, you know, he died early because you got to give the devil his dues. And it came with the legend of the Crossroads, where he went down. And I say, well, Elvis probably went there down too. Robert Johnson and Elvis died on the same day. So there's that interesting.
Oh, crazy.
tidbit. Yeah. So the blues was sort of the, again, devilish, trickster, magical part. We have to remember that most black people hated the blues. It was considered sinful and evil, but they loved it. They loved it. And again, a lot Elvis, he was very much into African American culture because where they lived in the Great Depression, there was the white trash like him on the wrong side of the tracks. You had him, the blacks, Lithuanian Jews, they were forgotten. They lived in a poverty that we can't even imagine. They toiled. There were bootleggers and sharecroppers, and they barely survived. Elvis lived, some nights he didn't have dinner. Some times he was homeless. It was horrible, but he understood the plight of everybody, the poor white man, poor black person who was lost in this country, and he grabbed onto those energies of the outsider, the downcast, the one longing for home, the one, screaming out to God, what is going on? Help me, help me. And he really, and of course the devilish magical music, he tapped into that, and he loved gospel music because he thought, especially like Pentecostalism and stuff, really let's go crazy and shake and be possessed instead of Dionysus, the Holy Spirit. You have to remember the term in the 40s, whenever you'd be in church and you got possessed and you started shaking and dancing and going on, the term was called rock and rolling. When you just went nuts.
Oh.
So you see that there, and that really transformed. Again, rock music was meant to be a form of spirituality, and that's really what Elvis. And people used to say that too when rock came out. Music critics were like, "What the hell is this? This is a holy tent revival, except they changed God to baby. It's the same thing. It's a form of spirituality, and it sort of makes common sense. I mean." When we go to concerts, we don't go to be entertained most of the time. We want to connect with the singer that spoke to us and help us know ourselves, saw something within us. Our plight gave us a way to heal through the music, and we want to connect with the singer. We want to create an egregore with the crowd, and it's a spiritual, like, mystery religion. And I don't care if it's the Grateful Dead or Taylor Swift. Your mileage may vary, but that's what rock music was. And again, Elvis is truly the shaman, high priest of this movement, and he always will be. He's the king. He's the GOAT.
Well, you're making a lot of sense to me because in so much as we have wounds or trauma, especially in so much as Black culture has generational trauma in America, by directing positive energy in that way or channeling that energy, it's also healing that energy and bringing us all together. And so I can see why you would say he's a shaman for America, because he was taking those broken elements of society and starting to mend it all together. And that's the fuel that helped us rise up collectively. So absolutely, I could totally see why you'd say he's a shaman. My favorite incarnation of the whole devil in the blues is I asked our Discord, like, hey, go on Spotify and type in Stag-O-Lee or Stack-O-Lee and just see how many incarnations of those songs are and see how many different depictions you have of both Stag-O-Lee, a black man, and is a white guy. And they can both represent the devil, like the white man or the black man. It's this ambiguous crossroads archetype. And I just love the whole topic.
Well said. Yeah, it is fascinating. You start going down to especially the myths in the South about the devil. I mean, we all know that the devil went down to Georgia. That's part of that sort of genre. But there's so many stories of this devil, and he helps people. But he'll help you one time, but then he'll transform into the evil white landlord. And so he'll destroy you, and he'll help you, which is what a trickster does. The trickster, whether it's the Nephilim or the blues devil, Prometheus is a trickster. The fire of the gods will help you, keep you warm at night and help you invent, but it will burn you too. And that's the great danger of the trickster. And with rock music, it was the same thing. Sure, it's going to liberate you, but it might lead you to jail, drugs, and the dark side of rock music. And the hero's journey is not meant to be easy. It's meant to really F you up. That's just the way it is.
Well, in your book, it sounds like Elvis had some pressure from the outside to not get into alternative spirituality or the occult, but he found himself attracted to it over and over. What led Elvis to seek the occult and alternative spiritualities in the first place, and how ubiquitous was it for him in his life?
Not much. I think people don't realize the Western esoteric system and Asian traditions was big in Europe since the 19th century and available. In the United States, it was like a wasteland. Sure, you had Theosophy had some success, California, New York, you had some movements there, some sparks. But in the United States, there just wasn't much. Yeah, you had before William James and some of the others kind of bring it up. But in the 40s and 50s, it was a big wasteland. You had the beat writers, Kerouac and Burroughs and all those guys talking about it, but there was nothing. And Elvis, he leaned toward it. He was always searching. A lot of it, like most of us, sometimes it's disappointment, and especially in our old traditions. When he came out, conservative Christianity hated him with a passion. Billy Graham, the great preacher, denounced him publicly. His own preacher said he was possessed by the devil. And Elvis was furious because he felt betrayed. And he realized, these things are just businesses, and he didn't like the idea of an eternal hell. He always thought there is reincarnation. He'd been able to astral travel, but he and his mom had to hide it from people. So he leaned, even when he was in the army in the 50s. He started reading when his mother died for comfort. He read Khalil Gibran's The Prophet. He started doing alternative spiritual modalities. And then it was in the 50s where he became more disillusioned, like celebrities. He realized, I've conquered rock and roll. I'm making all this money doing these vapid films. What else? My trauma is not better from my childhood and what's happened. So he met, by a synchronicity, he met Larry Geller, who was a big, I guess we'd call him New Ager back then. And Geller just opened the floodgates to a new world. Geller started giving him books about Theosophy and Gurdjieff and Manly P. Hall and Taoism and Freemasonry. And Elvis, he was off to the races, and he changed his life spiritually. And I would say he even really was the reason, again, these traditions became accepted in the West. We're talking early 60s and late 50s, way before the Beatles. In fact, where George Harrison used to go meditate at the ashram in the 60s, Elvis was already there years before him meditating. And what happened is that he didn't hide it, but he wasn't public about it. In other words, it was part of his daily life. He would get people to do circles, and they'd talk about these books and meditate. He would give out books to friends and family he liked. He was planting the seed of what would later become the 60s movement, if you know what I mean. He made it cool. Same with martial art. People perhaps don't realize that nobody liked martial art until Elvis made it acceptable in the late 60s, when he was out there with 4 black belts and he was doing videos and all that. The general public was like, oh, this strange thing called karate, maybe there's something to it. So he was certainly a pioneer of so many of the alternative traditions that we have today.
Didn't Priscilla even do karate? Because I think she left him for her karate instructor.
Yeah. Mike Stone. Yes, very true. In fact, for your audience, there's the Sofia Coppola movie that came out, I think, last year, Priscilla. And there is 10 minutes of Elvis and his spiritual side. And the truth is, he drove people crazy, because when people were with Elvis, they thought, oh, we're going to have parties, we're going to have flag football, and we're going to drive our fleet of motorcycles, and all the rock star. And he was like, no, let's just sit down and meditate and contemplate God. And even Priscilla, in the 60s, she was like, hey, Elvis, I want to get laid. He's like, no, I'm too spiritual for this. He drove everybody crazy. And he actually almost quit the industry twice, once to become a Christian monk and once to become a Hindu monk, an adept of Yogananda, and he had to be talked out of it. So it became a threat to the Elvis Inc., to, the millions of dollars he was bringing in. And then came this concerted campaign to separate him from his spirituality. It worked at first, but then he secretly went back into becoming an occultist when he was in Vegas and stuff. He just kept it more hidden.
One detail you mentioned in the book is how much his mother looks like Madame Blavatsky.
It does. That was Elvis had a lot of Achilles heels and a lot of blind spots because of the trauma of what happened to him as a child. And one of his things is, again, he and his mother had a very bad relationship. It was a very unhealthy relationship relationship. We can go to the reasons why, but it was very Oedipus. And when she died, he was crushed. And that's the thing. When he wanted to get rich simply to take care of his family, he didn't care about money. I mean, the guy from 1955 to 1977, they say he made about $4 billion.
Whoa.
When you think about, when you think about inflation, probably about $20 billion. I mean, he had Elon Musk kind of FU money, and he blew it all.
Hardly understand
he just didn't
that.
care. Yeah, he didn't care. He would give it to charity, he'd buy a fleet of Rolls Royce, and then give away all the cars to his friends. He'd buy a friend a house just on a whim. He didn't care. So he made money for his family. The problem is that his mother hated his fame. She didn't like the money and the fame. She wanted just a normal life. And the stress drove her to drinking and pills. Gee, sound familiar? And she died young. And even his father blamed him. It broke his heart. Said, because of you, Mama died. And it crushed him. He never got over that. So he was he was miserable with the money. But because his mother died, he had this obsession with people that looked like his mother. Like when he saw a picture of Madame Blavatsky, he's like, I gotta learn everything about Theosophy. When he met Daya Mata, who was Yogananda's successor, it reminded him of his mother, and he became like a devotee of Yogananda. People say, well, why did he pick Priscilla? Very simple. He was out, he saw this girl that reminded him of his mother, and he said, I have to have you. You have to be mine. You are my world. And that's what happened. Priscilla became his world.
That's so incredible. It makes sense. I'd like to imagine that Blavatsky maybe did reincarnate as his mom, and she's like his moonchild of some sort to help immanentize the eschaton. And I
love it.
I'm friendly to these revelations that are sometimes bizarre. His relationship with his mom reminded me a lot of Jack Parsons and his mom.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they were bizarrely close. And then there's also the strange connection where he was estranged from his father, who his name was Marvel, and he was a captain in the military. So Jack Parsons' father was actually a Captain Marvel.
Yeah, we know Captain Marvel influenced Elvis.
Yes, which I thought was very interesting because the taking care of business logo and the lightning bolt, I guess, is borrowed from Captain Marvel.
Captain Marvel.
Which is
and
also...
I've been finding out too, another person that is instrumental in Captain Marvel is David Bowie. So there's something about this guy. And there's a big occult story behind Captain Marvel. But anyway, sorry for the interruption.
Oh, no, I'd love to talk about this because now I don't know anything about superheroes. I had a John Carmack childhood. He's the one who created my childhood. I don't know much about superheroes, but help me figure this out. Okay, so Captain Marvel is empowered by a spiritual being named Shazam, which...
Wizard.
A wizard. Okay, he's possessed by a wizard.
Yeah, and he gets the power. Shazam means Solomon, Hermes, Atlas, whatever. All these gods.
Mercury or something.
Yeah.
Zeus and Achilles.
And that's the weird thing. He's the only real magical superhero in the golden age of comics. And,
which is how he can beat Superman in a fight.
Right. Mm-hmm. And he somehow, of all the comics, that's the one that Elvis and David Bowie really gravitated towards him, and he went through many transformations. But oh, and even the writer, not the creator, there's a writer, I forget his name, and it's in the book. The writer who made Captain Marvel famous was a big occultist into UFOs and paranormal activity. It's a weird story that itself. So there is something very magical about Captain Marvel and his powers.
I can't help but relate the lightning flash to the fall of Lucifer and, of course, that association with the trickster and the devil. Also, somebody who raises people up. You mentioned in the book he had this thing with peacocks. And of course, Lucifer and Melek Teus of the Yazidi tradition have some strong association. Right. And it's interesting, if we think of Elvis as a shaman for the United States, Melek Teus falls from grace, but he also quenches the fires of hell with his tears. And so he's also a wounded healer in this way. And because God is kind of this big impersonal idea, the Yazidi know that on the Day of Judgment, they're going to follow Melek Teus, King Peacock. So I guess when the end of days comes for America, we'll know who to follow.
Yeah, well said indeed. And like you said, Elvis, that was his favorite animal, probably. You go to Graceland, in his living room, there's a giant peacock engraving in his window. And even beyond the Yazidi, the peacock was always seen as a Christ force. So Yeah, another, and he used to allow peacocks roam free at Graceland. So yeah, that's another connection.
I like this direction we're going here with Lucifer because I'm seeing a connection here with Captain Marvel. But yeah, the lightning bolt, like symbolizing Lucifer.
Yeah.
How do you think he squared his occult studies and his initiated perspectives with his Christianity? Do you think he was disingenuous about his Christianity, or did he find a way to integrate it all together? And is that something that maybe we should be taking a cue from?
No, he was able to do it. Again, he was disillusioned by what traditional Christianity gave him. But once he started reading books like Joseph Benner, The Impersonal Life, and Manly P. Hall, and the Theosophists, the idea of the cosmic Christ was like his aha moment. That's when he was able to say, this is the Jesus that I want, that there is a Christ force and it lives within each one of us, and we can nurture it and help each other out, and that Jesus, more than this Jewish Messiah, was just one of many enlightened figures throughout history that helped mankind, along with Zoroaster, Buddha, and all those cats. And that's the Jesus he wanted, the living Jesus of the Gnostics, of the Gospel of Thomas, which he read, and so forth. So he was on board 100% with the sort of, again, mystical version of Jesus. And the Bible was always his favorite book, but he started seeing the Bible as a sort of place of metaphor and code and universal themes and gematria and all that. So all of this really helped him and find a new Jesus that worked with his view, and, you know, works with so many others in the New Age, esoteric and occult basis, if you would.
Because we love to talk about Christianity on the show, even though we have a Baphomet as our logo, and I think that confuses people. But it makes sense to me because, as you mentioned in your book, shamanism is a modality of religion of which Gnosticism is Christianity's addition. I love that you say that. I could not believe it when I found out that he had read the Gospels of Thomas. My mind was blown. When I first read the Gospels of Thomas, that was a huge awakening for me. I had like a little mini theophany. And I love to bring up on the show that really the Gospels of Thomas, along with the Nag Hammadi library, were found in time sequence to right when Jack Parsons and L. Ron Hubbard were beginning their Babylon ritual. So I find that compelling because here comes Elvis, who, as you basically prove in your book, becomes the living embodiment of the Aeon, right? He of this wisdom. You know, he has the Gospels of Thomas in his possession. Now he's on stage to help, you know, mend the racial and artistic wounds in our country. And the one religion he doesn't really vibe with is, of course, Scientology, as you mentioned in your book. And I thought that was so fascinating. It's almost like he understood the script without knowing the script. I'm sure he didn't know about Jack Parsons and L. Ron Hubbard, but he was a part of the story, and he intuitively knew that if you paired L. Ron Hubbard and Elvis Presley, I'm pretty sure those two, like, L. Ron Hubbard would have taken over the world, like, no doubt.
Yeah, he thought Scientology was a scam, was a godless religion. That's what he called it. And he, as somebody said, he avoided it like the cobra, because in the early 70s, Scientology was making huge inroads in LA and the West Coast, and he hated it. He just didn't like it. And he thought he was a little suspicious of the Roman Catholic tradition, mainly because he thought they were hiding all this stuff in the vaults, and he wanted in. He wanted in, so he didn't trust the Catholic leadership. But yeah, Scientology was something. He probably was aware of Aleister Crowley. He did read a book. I forget the name of the book, but it talked about it's called the White Brotherhood, and it goes about all the ascended masters, and it does mention that Crowley was one of the last ones. So he probably did know about Crowley, but he never mentioned anything about Thelema.
He was too Thelema for Thelema.
He did practice some sort of ceremonial magic from certain books on the New Age Egyptian sex magic, and he did rituals, and he had his own rituals, and he loved meditation and all that, but mainly drawing from Theosophy and Kriya Yoga from Yogananda. But he would try it. He tried a lot of things, but no, Thelema was not one of them.
Could we rattle off any off the top of our heads? Because we know that David Bowie walked around with Psychic Self-Defense by Dion Fortune, I believe. And even on social media right now, the big craze is this guy who shows his morning ritual, duct tapes his mouth shut, gets up and he dunks his face in a a bowl of ice water that's been poured from some very specific bottles of water. And are there any rituals that we know Elvis performed? I know that he was a bit of a healer, and so he had some sort of a method of healing people.
Yeah, it was very eclectic. It's almost like he and Larry Geller and Diamata would sort of draw from different traditions and create sort of a stew. But the blue light was very important, as I talk about in the book. When he was born, this blue light appeared over his house. Was it the mothership dropping him or some sort of omen? But blue was very important, the energy blue. And you start noticing that a lot of Elvis songs and movies have blue. And the day he died, he wore blue. As I argue, his death was more of a ritual that he knew about. He predicted his death. But blue was there. And whenever he would do a lot of his healing, he would picture blue and he would be able to heal people's legs or sore backs or a heart attack once. It was very important. And sometimes it was pretty goofy, like, again, this is 50s, 60s occultism, but there was one time a friend calls him and says, my son is sick. He's got a high fever. And Elvis is like, oh, I'll be right over, and Elvis shows up, a little while next, and he puts on like a turban and a cape, and he starts like doing this blue light stuff. It's like, sometimes he was just sort of innovating and winging it, but it worked. That kid's fever broke when he did it. So again, it's almost like he was just throwing stuff together. And as always, Elvis was very intuitive about what worked. Whether it was his art or music or anything else, he knew what to tap into it. And I go in the book some of the rituals that he thought, and some sex magic rituals that he would do with Ginger Alden. Again, meditation circles, other things, wearing the right necklaces like the Egyptian Ankh and all that. So yeah, he was pretty eclectic and intuitive about what he did. And being Elvis, he wasn't going to follow any structure to a T. It's just not what he did.
The blue light reminds me a lot of how a lot of people use blue light in the LBRP ritual. Yeah.
Yeah, and blue is, I go in a chapter, blue is a very important color in ufology. There's a science to it that, I forget, it's very complicated, but somehow these UFOs, they do certain chemicals, isotopes, and the human eye can see blue, but it doesn't appear on radar. So that's how they fool people. And you have examples in Brazil and all over the country of a blue light. Then the authorities cannot see this blue light. Even in the one that startled me, during the Black Death in Europe, one thing people reported when people died of the plague, they'd see a blue light appear at the top of the roof. So some people think, were these demons, aliens? Again, who knows? But blue is very important to Elvis and in occultism, and I go in depth in the book. I have a chapter on it.
David Lynch seems to be aware of this blue color being very significant.
Blue velvet, yeah.
And I have a theory that it might be alluding to the middle pillar. They sometimes call that the blue path in certain schools. There's colors associated with each of the paths on the tree of life, and all the ones in the middle are a shade of blue. So I think that there's kind of like this, cut the bullshit just straight up the tree. We're going to cross the abyss through the high priestess kind of energy in this blue zone and come back down, be a shaman of sorts. Once you learn how to do this process over and over again, you're kind of just doing magic. You're pulling from the aether and then bringing it down.
Yeah, remember, and I just remembered this, but blue is a color that we discovered for thousands of years. Whether you read Homer or Hindu scriptures, there's no blue color. The sky is purple. Homer says it's wine color. There's no blue ocean. We discovered the color blue at some point in our history. And also, as they say, people with blue eyes, that's an aberration. There was some sort of trauma, and blue-eyed people and green-eyed people just showed up in history. So yeah, there's something otherworldly about blue.
I tend to visualize blue light like the color of lightning or electricity. And I feel like that goes hand in hand with the lightning bolt, Captain Marvel, David Bowie, like all yeah.
David Bowie was into the Brill. He loved the Brill. Yeah, he knew that too. You start researching, you're like, oh my God. He and Elvis were tapping into this very strange magic. And again, Captain Marvel was in the background, Shazam. So yeah, it's quite a bit of a freaky rabbit hole that I'm finding myself in.
I love blue. It's my favorite color, but it also pertains to the throat chakra. So the energy of speech and communication. So then the
Wow.
singing is interesting. It's also, like you said, we had to discover blue over time. Like, it wasn't always something that we identified in our language, but it was a royal color for a long time because the pigment for blue, lapis lazuli, was a pretty rare stone until we had artificial blue pigmentation we could use.
I like to
you guys are giving me ideas for the sequel.
I say peacock blue is my favorite color, hands down. Yeah.
Well-
Taoist be with you.
On the Kabbalistic Tree of Life, blue, at least in the Queen scale, I think is associated with Chesed, which is the domain of Jupiter, the king of the gods. And I know...
Yeah, that's Jupiter's ancient color before we had
And
telescopes. Yeah.
Oh,
Lightning.
Yeah, he's the god of the sky also, lightning, blue.
of course.
And then your book, which comes out on the 8th of April on Book of the Law Day, which now you have revealed to us was chosen by the gods. So all the Thelemites that listen to this show need to purchase the book, which comes out on April the 8th. And if you remember from that history, you have Aleister Crowley being magical frat boy. He goes into the pyramids, which we're learning things about right now in real time. His wife who gets possessed, of course, and he doesn't believe her. So what does he do? He asks her a bunch of questions like, okay, if you're possessed by Horus, what are your qualities? And she says, my color is blue. And that was one of the things that Aleister Crowley was like, okay, maybe it is Horus.
Interesting. Very interesting. How deep the rabbit hole goes, huh?
Well, I have a few more questions for you, sir, if you'd be down to hang out with us for at least one more hour.
Yeah, I think I can do it if you don't mind me filling up my coffee.
Oh, please. I think we do a little bit of a cigarette or joint break between, so please take 5.
I'm doing it. Yeah, let me take 5 and I'll be right back.
All right, everybody, and if you'd like to hear the rest of that, please visit www.patreon.com/thewholerabbit, where your monthly donation of just $5 will get you this extended episode and all the rest of our extended episodes, because you are our supporters. We don't have any sponsors. You're all we have. We need your $5. Anyway, thank you. That being said, hope to catch you on the flip side. Thank you, everybody. Eat carrots and shoot lasers.
Pew, pew, pew.
Phew.